Hello there, I am Mr. Magoo or Alex or whatever, and yeah, I want to show off this idea, this vision I have. It's going to be a game engine, and it's not going to be your normal game engine, it's actually going to be an MMO engine, and not only that, it's not going to be your typical online game engine where you kick off a server in the background and you host that somewhere, and then you're paying for processing time for anything and everything that is going through your backend. So like monster movement, player movement, persisting all players in real time, and monsters and NPCs and items in real time, and basically dancing with all of that. Instead, this design is going to be serverless. Now, what does that mean? I'll explain that in a sec. But yeah, to start off, this is going to be called GM Maker. So you are the game master, you're the GM, and you are going to be using this engine. And by doing that, it is making you the GM. This is a maker of GMs. So yeah, and the URL will be gmmaker.com. I'm going to go into some of the tech design. Now, granted, this is very early on, so I'm just sketching out ideas of how everything's going to pan out. I have built many proofs of concept or minimum viable products that kind of represent what this thing is going to be. Granted, I haven't done the full design or implementation overall and prove this concept, but I have made and proven all the individual pieces required to build this thing up. So let's start off. So the technical design is a high-level game. It's high-level game pieces coupled with their low-level technical implementations. What does that mean? It means big picture stuff like monsters, players, items, NPCs, etc. How do those tether to the actual code, or maybe the technical stack, which is this link right here. Let me actually jump first in here, and then I'll kind of jump back to map state stuff. But yeah, so the tech stack will be React for the front end, TypeScript for the front end, Tailwind CSS, Vite to kind of build and host it all, and then NPM, which is kind of your generic JavaScript, duct tape for packages and managing those packages. The back end will be you have the server, database, and hosting. Those are pretty basic. However, since this is serverless, there is no server. So business logic actually lives on the front end and is secured to avoid hackers abusing things through Firebase security rules. All things will persist on the database using the Firebase real-time database. So that will be a nice balance of speed, real-time speed, meaning like sockets, web sockets, but then also just storing everything kind of in plain JSON. Now granted, it's going to be all orchestrated together and production ready for you. And then hosting this thing, since it doesn't have to spin up processing time for the backend, since there is no server, it's just going to kind of live somewhere hosted on Firebase hosting. It'll live there, and when anyone with their front end hits that endpoint, they will get the front end client, and then the JavaScript will build everything up, and they will still see the full game, your game, and it'll just be running, and there won't be any back end stuff required. You won't need to start up a back end server. This thing will be serverless. So data will be persisted through Firebase. Hosting will be done through Firebase. Security rules to protect the data and mutation of the data will be done through Firebase, and then authenticating and logging in for player accounts will all be done through Firebase. So Firebase is the core system design here. And yeah, this is kind of an overview. It's meant for millions upon millions for scalability. Truly massive. And then I would say the final piece of this is to tie in that tech stack with the higher level stuff. So we got like map state. We're going to have AI and NPCs and monsters, and kind of how is this all going to work together and orchestrate. So the main idea is inspired by Rocket League. So they kind of, and also just engines, physics engines in general, that they kind of will take some initial state, and then they'll get let's say input from like players, so like timestamp stuff, and based on the initial and the player input, like the history, they can actually fast forward everything based on the internal logic of how monsters are supposed to move, how NPCs are supposed to move and do things, and the physics of players and items and the interaction of all these things. These will be kind of all coupled together in a nice little engine logic right here. And this engine can be fast forwarded, it can be rewound, it can be reset to the initial state. So using an initial state and then using player input history and just having like a clock in general, something ticking on the front end. Granted, all front ends will be using, like let's say UTC time, so it'll all be synchronized that way. And yeah, all of this together will lead to a real-time online multiplayer experience, and you'll have full AI logic, but it'll all live on the front end, and it'll all be managed through security rules and persist in the database. But yeah, so this is kind of it in a nutshell, and I just wanted to start off this overview and discussion. So thank you.